Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure. Watch me as I rock a team.
Alright, episode 41 of Fight Talk Down Under is brought to you by CMBT Nutrition. Go to cmbt.com.au for all your protein powder, protein bars, pre-workout, all that good stuff. Of course, CMBT are big supporters of Aussie MMA and of course Fight Talk Down Under, so go to cmbt.com.au, use a promo code Justin for 10% off at the checkout. That's cmbt.com.au, promo code Justin. We're also brought to you by Nutcare. Now, the fact is, guys, that 83% of penile injuries involve a razor. But guys, it doesn't have to be this way. Bare Nuts hair removal cream is much easier and safer than shaving and far less painful and time-consuming than waxing. So, guys, join the grooming revolution. Go to nutcare.com.au. Use the promo code FIGHTNEWS for 10% off at the checkout. That's nutcare.com.au, promo code FIGHTNEWS. Well, welcome everyone. We've got a pretty special episode this week. Of course, we've got the reigning featherweight eternal champion in our ranks. Of course, we're going to cover off some of the locals. Steve Erceg in the UFC. We're going to cover off all the good stuff from Eternal 76. Of course, I'm Dan from Fight News Australia, and my co-host, as mentioned, is still the eternal featherweight champion. Of course, it's Lockjaw Justin Van Heerden. How are you, mate?
Good, yeah. And still, we got it done. It was a fun weekend. It was a cool card to be a part of. Fucking a good way to cap it off with a big finish at the end.
Absolutely. And I guess that the man who's been sort of much vaunted for his grappling is now knocking people out. So that must have been pretty satisfying. Yeah,
it's obviously, like I sort of said going into the fight, and I was pretty confident that I was gonna put him away. And obviously I know that I've got a well-rounded skill set and what I'm capable of across the board. But yeah, I guess it was cool to get that sort of, get the knockout and actually, get that finish, and then sort of, I guess, put that in people's mind as well that, at no point is there anywhere in the fight where I can't, find a finish. Like if the opening's there, I'm going to look for it. I'm going to take it, and it's going to be all she wrote. So, but it was cool. Yeah, it was cool to do it like that. And it's interesting how that plays out, right? How this sort of the fight game is and how things sort of pan out, because it was almost 2 years ago to the day that I got TKO'd in that very same venue by the man across from me. So, and then to just like fast forward 2 years and, sleep him in front of that Perth crowd was a pretty cool experience. It's one of those ones that sort of sticks out so far in the career.
Yeah, do you feel a bit sort of, vindicated by the knockout? Like, obviously, we saw you dropped Muhammad Alavi and Diego Pereira as well, but the narrative is always that Lockjaw is this sort of wrestler, this suffocating wrestler. That's his game. Do you feel a bit vindicated now? Can we put this narrative to bed?
No, I want him to keep it. If people wanna keep seeing it, looking at me as just a guy with wrestling and good cardio, let's keep that, and and then it's going to lead to some pretty more spectacular knockouts.
Absolutely, and yeah, we had some spectacular finishes at Eternal 76. Of course, we'll get balls deep in Lockjaw versus Rod, of course, but also on the card. There was a bit of a last minute shuffle. Obviously, Seb Zalay was. I think he pulled out, didn't he? He had a bit of a weigh-in issue. So that his fight with Chris Ostianovsky was scratched at the last minute. Do you know, obviously he's your teammate, do you have some sort of background on what happened there and how he's going?
Yeah, so it was probably a week out from the fight. Seb had a few sort of, I guess, health issues and that pop up, and kind of just led to him sort of pretty much not being cleared for the fight, and having to make that decision to pull out. So at the end of the day, this sport is so ruthless on your body. And if something like comes up where it's, affecting you and you're not going to be able to go in there and perform at 100%, you got to sometimes make that call. So yeah, he's doing that. And he's just recovering and kind of getting himself back to neutral so he can get back in there. So yeah, he's doing good. Obviously he was in my corner on the night as well. So he still came out to sort of Perth and was still, out around and kind of trying to support and help out as much as he could. But yeah, at the end of the day, had to pull out because of health concerns, and then the fight sort of had to fall out. But I think everyone is pretty understanding, even though even his opponent, I saw him at the airport and across the weekend, and a few times he spoke to me about the situation with Seb and that, and he was pretty understanding and stuff like that. So that's always cool. But yeah, so that fight obviously fell through, so it led to some sort of shuffling around on the card.
Absolutely, yeah. So we had Toby Meach versus Jamie Renoff was sort of moved onto the main card. Ended up being a pretty brief encounter in the end. How did you view that one?
Yeah, so that fight was like over super fast. I remember obviously I was at the back, and then I remember the boys walked out. They made the walk to the cage, and then it seemed like it was just like a couple seconds later. I heard Blake announcing the winner, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, what happened?" And then, it was obviously there was because we had the fights on out the back, but there was like a minute delay on where the device that we were streaming on. So we were we heard the crowd go crazy, and we heard like a bunch of commotion, but then we still didn't know who the winner was yet or what happened, and then we saw that we ended up seeing that Meach won by guillotine. So yeah, it was nice. It was beautiful how he set it up, and you could tell once he grabbed the neck, the way he did it, it was almost like a few shades of a sort of Rod Costa influence on that finish. And I think he said even afterwards, like he knew it was done once he grabbed the neck, like he knew it was over. So yeah, it was a good fight, good way for Meach to string together another sort of victory and keep the momentum rolling.
Definitely, and just a quick note there for Eternal MMA. Tapology does say that Ryan Robertson was the victim of the guillotine. There, we just discussed this off air, so it's a bit of a stitch up for Ryan. So Eternal, if you want to update that one, I'm sure you'll be hearing about it from someone at some point somewhere. But where does this win sort of leave Toby Meach? I think he's 5-2 now. So where does he sort of sit in the bantamweight sort of pecking order?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Like he's, I think, it's another win for him. So I think he's just got to sort of keep stringing them together now. Obviously, he seems like that the decision to move to Scrappy and be based out of Scrappy MMA is sort of obviously paying off, and he's, got the momentum. And I think that all he needs to do now is have activity and then just keep stringing the wins together, and then be building towards something pretty major. Obviously, his teammate is the current champion. So obviously that's always a bit tricky, but at least you keep fighting these fights, keep getting these wins over some top bantamweights, and it's just going to keep putting you in an even better position. So I think for Meach now, I'd be looking at potentially getting a sort of quick turnaround and fighting as soon as possible, if not looking to fight on that Sydney card.
Yeah, definitely. I guess he's he obviously hasn't taken any damage in this fight, so he probably could turn it around quickly if he wants to stay active. But obviously, after that one, Aaron McConnell and George Mangos locked horns. I actually missed this one because I was just kind of dealing with all the chaos at home. But what did you make of? Did you get to watch this one from the back? And if so, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I got to watch this one. Obviously, I was excited. I was interested to see how this fight was going to play out because of McConnell's sort of striking pedigree and his boxing background. And then obviously I've had a sort of closer sort of look at Mangos a few times because he's come down to freestyle a few times, and obviously he's based at Lions Den in Sydney, so he's a teammate of someone like Michael Stanoff and Abel Bright. So you're constantly seeing a bit of bits and pieces here, and obviously he was undefeated as an amateur. So the fight had all the makings to be an absolute barn burner, and Mangos came out and put on a damn show. Like landed some hard shots early on. I think that kind of threw McConnell off his game completely. Like there was a few left hooks and an uppercut here and there that just kind of sat him down and then hurt him a few times, and I think that kind of threw him off. And then after that, Mangos was able to get a takedown, secure position, and then he was like right in his corner. So he had Luke Pizzuti talking him through positions, and ultimately sort of keeping him calm, keeping him patient, and then finding that neck and finishing with a rear naked choke. But it was a beautiful performance, and a great way to sort of announce yourself on that platform. He moves to 2-0 as a pro now. And definitely someone to keep an eye on, a young, dangerous, talented dude to keep an eye on in the featherweight division.
Definitely. And after that one was Wes Kappa versus John Bruin. It was an entertaining fight while it lasted. It was a bit of a weird sort of finish. It looked like John might have suffered a bit of an injury at some stage. That he seemed compromised towards the end, and in the end, sort of I don't want to say quit on his stool, but the fight was sort of waved off between rounds, giving the win to Wes Kappa. So how did you view sort of how that one played out? How did Wes Kappa look? And do you have any inside info on Bruin's injury?
Yeah, they started off straight away just getting after it, the boys, which was kind of what I expected from both guys. Obviously, it's been a hot minute since we've seen Wes Kappa in there, so it was cool to see how he would respond, especially to a fast start like that. To see if there was going to how that was going to sort of play a factor, and especially once the sort of wrestling and grappling got thrown his way as well. But yeah, so obviously a sort of fast start to the first round. So with John, actually his knee popped out in the first round. He got back to the stool and said to his corner that his knee was out. And then was able. So at the end of the first, we saw Wes pour on a few shots, and then he landed a body shot. And then right after that, when John was sort of walking back to his corner, he collapsed down. So I think people, and watching it, people thought that it might have been a body shot or a liver shot, and it was just like the delayed reaction to that. But it was actually his knee that was out. And then so when he was sitting on the stool, his corner asked if do they need to call it? And I think what happened was his knee popped back in. So he, being that it was back in, he was like, all right, no, I can continue. So got back out there, got stuck in the second round. And then I guess at some point in the second round, it went again and just didn't reset. So, he saw out the second round, and Wes started obviously, pouring it on and doing his thing. And then, I think it was on the stool in the second round where the corner, made this, he just told him to pull it and that he wouldn't be able to keep going out because his knee was out and wouldn't pop back in, wouldn't reset. So, a rough sort of way for it to go for John, but that's the game. That's how it is sometimes. But credit to that dude for still trying to push on and trying to deal with that as best as he could. But did the right thing, I think, in my eyes, to pull the plug and go, nah, let's just live to fight another day. And can't take anything away from Wes Kappa. He was looking good in there, especially for such a long layoff. He was dealing with the wrestling and grappling threats that were sort of thrown at his way, and obviously on the feet, he was doing some good work. So it was interesting to see him back in there, and it was cool to see. There was a few times where he just kind of showed that he's been obviously been working a well-rounded MMA game. So leading up into the fight, so it was cool. It was still a cool fight, and there was still some cool exchanges despite the sort of lackluster ending with the injury.
Yeah, definitely. So it was a dislocated knee, was it? Is that the...
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That can be pretty serious then. So, like you say, he did well to sort of push through something like that.
Yeah, no, it's crazy that he... I think Joe told me, because Joe obviously was in the corner, and Joe told me what happened was he was sitting on the stool between rounds 1 and 2, and then jumped off the stool because he was like, oh, I just need to get off the stool. And then I think in the process of him just it's obviously probably not, maybe it's something that's happened before, because he obviously, knew enough to try and do something to get it back in. And I guess he tried to do that at the end of the second, but it just didn't sort of happen. Sort of I guess, shades of Dillashaw, against Aljamain. Obviously he's dealing with that shoulder, knew some way to sort of get it going again, but then just ultimately couldn't get it sorted. And that was it. But, I think it was. I don't actually know how, at what point his knee went out in the first, and what actually led to that. If it was from the wrestling, or from some kicks, or something that Kappa was throwing his way. But yeah, all in all, still a gutsy sort of performance from him to sort of push forward and still try and get after it. But another cool fight on the card, and obviously a decent way for Wes Kappa to announce himself back in the MMA sort of fold.
Yeah, definitely. So perhaps the injury was was sort of remaining from training camp. He might have carried it into the fight by the sound of things. But obviously, Wes, it's his first MMA fight in 14 years, which is there's got to be some sort of record almost. Like that's a fair sort of gap. Obviously, he's still been fighting. He had 30 odd fights in boxing, and he's obviously been active in Muay Thai as well. So he's no stranger to a fist fight. But what did you make of it? Like he was pretty sort of confident afterwards. Like he sort of said in the cage after the fight that he feels like he can sort of whip some of these guys in his division, and he's clearly been working on the takedown defense as well. He obviously sprawled pretty well when John Bruin went after the legs. So yeah, what can we expect from him at 34, 14-year layoff? Like, do you think he can come in and do some damage?
Yeah, I think there's certainly some interesting fights for him that are possible. There some possible barn burners that he could potentially have, and I guess it just depends. I mean, we know how it is in the fight game, man. Like it's at that age, people are going to be saying like, oh, he's too old to be thinking about something that's what's next or blah blah blah. But who knows? There's plenty of avenues to sort of pursue down, and I guess if you go out there and just keep putting it on people that are put in front of you, there's going to be no way that you can't sort of progress forward and still sort of, get picked up by one of these other sort of bigger organizations and, go out there and do your work. So it'd be interesting to see what's next. I certainly hope that it's not going to be another 14 years before we see him fight again. So let's hope he's, does the same thing and gets straight back in.
Yeah, you'd think activity would probably be what he's after. It sounds like he wants to pursue MMA at this point.
And especially for that sort of weight range with like lightweight, super lightweight type deal, wouldn't Wes Kappa, Dim Skillies just be a barn burner? Can we just make that happen at lightweight, or is that?
Yeah, can we just make that now? Can we just get Cam
just
on
make
the phone
that fight?
And be like, hey, I got one for you.
That'd be a banger. Imagine that. I'd watch that. I'd watch that all day long.
Fucking absolutely, sign me up. God, Lockjaw the matchmaker is at it again. I'll tell you what, they need to put you on the payroll as a matchmaker as well. I'll tell you what. But don't mind that one at all. Do you reckon he's going to settle at lightweight? Is the super lightweight actually a division? Was this sort of essentially a catch weight? Like,
well, it makes sense that you would have done this fight at super lightweight, just especially after 14 years, just to kind of see how your body would respond. But now that he's done it and he's training and he's just finished a camp and is in shape, I could possibly see him fighting. I could see him fighting at lightweight. I stood next to him when a couple of times on the weekend, was sort of around where he was. It's not it's not like he's too big to make lightweight or be straining himself too much. So I think it'd be cool. Yeah, I think if he's able to or wants to do that, there's some banger fights for him at lightweight.
Yeah, awesome. So, I guess following that fight was Alden Bates getting back in there as well, getting another win over Stu Dare. Obviously, Stu has announced his retirement in the cage after the fight. So, what did you make of the fight first?
First off, Alden Bates is fucking huge. He is a
Isn't he?
big human being. Holy shit. So obviously I was there for the entire weekend. So I saw him at the weigh-ins and then saw him on the night. He was in the same change room as me in the same corner. And, just every time I see that dude, it amazes me that I'm like, how did you weigh in at 77 kilos? And yeah, it was insane. So that was the first thing that kind of sort of stuck out, was just the size difference and actually how big Alden was. But Stu's obviously game. He's never been in like a boring fight, so I expected that regardless of the result, there was going to be like violence in that cage and during that fight. And the boys got after it. Alden walked him down, was trying to impose his will, use his size, use his power. Stu was sort of doing a lot of work on the fence to try and look like he was almost trying to draw Alden in and counter. And a few times he landed some good counter shots. And there was a few times where I was like, oh, if Alden's careless and doesn't respect what's coming back his way, as Adesanya said when he was talking about the Pereira fight, like if you don't knock on the door first, if you just try and barge in, you might be in some trouble. So I feel like it was cool to see that. Stu was still obviously throwing some leather his way. and then obviously we saw Alden was able to sort of eventually find those shots and sneak them through and land with some absolute power. Like you got to imagine in a fight, especially early on, early stages in a fight like that, like the dude's carrying a lot of power, and so it didn't look like those shots tickled. I'll just say that it looked like there was a lot of power involved there, and obviously, he was able to string it together, land some devastating blows, and ultimately get the TKO finish. So another, it was an exciting fight, another win for Bates, and that's kind of what we spoke about leading into the fight, right? We said he needs to come out with the intensity that he showed in the third round against Vake, and then it's almost gonna be a hard, a hard night for Stu, and it's going to be hard to stop Alden if he comes out with that level of intensity and intent, and that's exactly what we saw. So it's cool. I hope to see him back in there ASAP. They did say on the broadcast that the winner of that fight will fight Luciano next. So whether and then we saw Alden afterwards in the cage say that, if that's a fight he'd love. If that fight doesn't happen, he called out Andrew Mills. He just wants to fight. There's a bunch of guys that he feels are sort of ahead of him in the rankings, as he said, and he just wants to fight them and keep stringing together wins. So we might be seeing like the new rejuvenated Alden Bates, back in there looking to cause some damage.
Definitely, yeah. Certainly looking to cause some damage. And you spoke about the intensity there. He certainly brought that against Stu Dare. So, it's an interesting sort of matchup against Joe Luciano. If Luciano's sort of still on the scene, like I think there seems to be a little bit of chatter around that, he's sort of knocking on the door of a contender series or something like that, or might be looking for that kind of opportunity. But, if he's not, then that's kind of a fun matchup, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. I like watching, I like watching both guys fight. They both have obviously different styles, and sort of how they approach the game. But it'd be a banger of a fight, and with those welterweight fights, and at any point, the lights can just be shut off like immensely. So definitely be a cool fight to watch. But just a few things probably got to play out, I guess. But regardless, I think that we're going to see a lot more of Bates this year. He's already 2 fights in this year, so I think we'll see him back in there again soon.
Yeah, I think activity seems to be on his mind. Like I think the call out of Mills was obviously a premeditated sort of thing. So it was kind of funny when he sort of got sort of kind of caught unaware with the whole Luciano thing. Kind of derailed his call out a little bit. But I guess we're going to see more of him.
Yeah, 100%. I look forward to it. He's a nice dude. He was real cool at the back, and it was dope to see him sort of come out there and get the win, and then just see the energy that he had leading into the fight, and then after the fight as well, like the intensity that he has out the back, and when he's warming up with his team and moving around, and just watching that sort of play out, because it's such a different sort of approach to how I am on fight night, or and it's so different for certain fighters. You see certain things, but I remember just sitting there at one stage, and Joe's wrapping my hands, and Alden, his gloves were on, his hands were wrapped, and he was like, he was almost touching the wall, and then every now and then he would just dig a shot into the wall, and he was just in his own sort of zone, like obviously getting in the zone. And I was just like looking at Joe, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? That guy is so big, he's so intense. So no, it was cool. I hope to see him back in there soon.
Yeah, I guess like everyone sort of gets into the zone differently, don't they? As you kind of touched on there, like some people need to be fired up and almost sort of angry and that sort of thing, and other people just need to be kind of relaxed and be able to just sort of flow. And obviously you're probably in the latter camp there. Yeah,
no, 100%.
And for Stu Dare, obviously, he announced his retirement after the fight. So what do you make of his career? That's a guy who's been there and done that. He's fought on all kinds of promotions against all kinds of opponents on the local scene. So how do you sort of sum up his career?
Yeah, he's one of those. Yeah, one of the few. One of those dying breed. Like a fighter's fighter, shows up, fights anyone, and just gets in there, and it's always violent. It's always exciting. No, I like Stu, man. I think he's one of the toughest human beings I think that you'll find that's ever come out of the Australian MMA scene. So, to see him sort of wrap it up on the weekend and call it quits and on the career and kind of, he's obviously going to move on to some other things. But just an absolute legend. One of those people that you're always going to like seeing fight. So it's going to be a bit sad to know that he's not going to be back in there putting on barn burners for us to watch.
Yeah, is there a bit of a? You sort of said he's touched on how he's a dying breed there. Like, is there a bit of a void to fill when guys like that sort of hang up the gloves? You know, the people like that who are just willing to just step in against anyone and put on these wars. You know, that's kind of they're kind of hard to find, aren't they?
Yeah, I think as the game evolves and as the sport evolves, that style of just going in and throwing leather, and it's probably going to get fewer and fewer and more. We're probably going to see it less and less. But there is part of you that, as a fan of the sport and as a fan of fighting, where you just look at stuff like that. Sometimes you go, "Fuck, that's cool. So give me more of that." So it is. Yeah, it is sort of. It does leave a void like that, and they come and go. But there's certainly the people that are willing to get in there with anyone at any time and just, I'm going to hit you harder than what you hit me and just throw leather. Like, yeah, it's always a cool thing to see in the sport.
Definitely. Now in the co-main event, obviously the Australian lightweight title changed hands once again. So yeah, Quillan Salkeld pulled off a bit of a shocker, really, a first round knockout against Blake Donnelly. He's obviously known as sort of one of the better boxers in that division and probably on the local scene. And Quillan laid him out pretty hard there with that right hand. Obviously, we know Blake's your guy, so what did you make of the fight? And have you spoken to Blake?
Yeah. So obviously not the result that we were chasing, but no, like Quinlan killed it. It was a beautiful, beautiful setup and how he caught him and the finish. And I saw after the fact, I saw a clip put up where he was actually drilling, landing that combination in the gym. So it's obviously something that they worked on and felt that they could exploit off the jab from Blake, because Blake's obviously got a laser crisp jab and good boxing. So, you're not going to knock someone for finding a sort of a read and then utilizing it straight away and doing it so fast and almost immediately like that in the fight. So, but yeah, obviously, it was shitty to see Blake sort of not get the result. But I didn't get to watch it like on the night, obviously, because I was in the next fight, so I didn't watch it take place. But I knew, see, the boys went out. They made the walk, got into the cage. I heard the announcers do their thing, and then I was sort of. It seemed like it was almost instant, and then Joe and Seb came walking back into the room and were like, "Yep, fight's over. Blake lost." I was like, "Holy shit!" But that's how it is. Sometimes it's happened. It just happens. It just happens sometimes where you just get caught. And unfortunate for Blake, that's his only two losses are pretty much the same. Like where it was just early on, and there was that one little moment where he just got caught, and that was all she wrote. But he was pretty good. Obviously he was very classy in the cage afterwards. Immediately out the back, he came to me, gave me a hug, wished me luck for my fight, and just did his thing. And even when I spoke to him, like the day after, or it might have been on the Monday when I spoke to him about it, just to check in, see how he was going, he just sort of said, it is what it is. Like he seemed pretty content and wasn't making any excuses or anything like that. It was just kind of like, all right, obviously you're not happy with a loss, and especially not a knockout loss like that. But like he seemed like he was in the right spot mentally, and was like, all right, knows what his plan is, knows what he needs to do, and he's going to, go ahead with that. But then on the other end, for Quinlan, that was insane, man. Like you're fighting in front of your home crowd, you're fighting for your first Australian title against a way more experienced opponent, the most well-rounded guy you've ever fought, a big lightweight, and to go out there and do what he did and win with a knockout like that is insane. And he's only 23 years old, man. I think that's something that I sort of forgot about leading into the fight when we were breaking it down. But he's 23 years old, man. Like that kid's got a long career in MMA still ahead of him. And I did like that after the fact. I saw him do an interview afterwards, and he spoke about, he's not going to rush trying to get fast tracked into the UFC or another big promotion or anything like that. He wants to feel like he's earned it, but also he wants to get a few more fights up, under his sleeve and get some more experience. I think he wants to have sort of double-digit fights before he's fighting in one of these top organizations, because he's only had like 5 fights or something like that. So, it's still early days for that young man. And but yeah, talented, super dangerous, and just a nice kid. So to see him sort of go out there and get his success like that, you can't help but be happy for people when stuff like that happens.
Absolutely, yeah. He's a nice guy. I've interviewed Quillen a couple of times. He's he's quite a sort of a thoughtful sort of character, which is I guess there's a lot of people like that in this sport, which is kind of interesting. It's not really what you would expect, but like, so I guess we talked about before this fight, like with Quillen, like we don't really know what we've got, right? Like, like you say, he's 20 or 23 years old. He's sort of stepped up to every challenge that he'd had so far, but he'd only had 4 pro fights going into this weekend against again, like you say, one of the best lightweights in the country, and a vastly experienced one at that. So now he's stepped up. He's passed this next challenge. Like, what have we got here? Is this a guy who can go on to, like you say, a big promotion and win a world title? Is this the sort of kind of? It's obviously early days, but is this sort of the level of talent that we're looking at here?
Yeah, I think if he keeps approaching it like he is now, and doesn't rush his sort of journey, and keeps looking to improve, keeps that same mentality, and continues to sort of set himself those challenges and those goals for each fight, and each sort of new level of opponent that he's going to face, I think 100% he could go a very, very long way in the sport, and potentially, and obviously lightweight's an absolutely stacked division across the board, and talent stack, dangerous division across the board. But he keeps doing what he's doing, keeps rising to the challenge, and keeps leveling up like he has been. 100%, I could see him going in there and making a name for himself in a big sort of promotion.
Yeah, definitely. The potential seems to be there, and he just gets better in every fight. That's always like I don't know, I guess an indicator of what the ceiling might be with someone like that. Like every time you see Quillen, he just looks more and more accomplished, and so yeah, I have high hopes anyway. I was super impressed with his last couple of performances, and it looks like he's going to go places. So is the winner of Martinez versus Joblin next for him, do you think, or is there someone else in the wings? What do you reckon?
Well, I saw he said that's what he said. He said potentially it could be the winner of that. Could be like but he's happy for that, or he's happy to fight Josh Togo. That makes sense too. You could do Quinlan and Togo. I think it's just there's a few interesting. Obviously lightweight, there's a bunch of banger fights at lightweight, but I could see them doing either or really, and obviously with Martinez and Joblin, if Joblin wins, I could see them throwing that together. Like they could do, Joblin and Quinlan. They might straight away, we just want to do that. But I don't know. If Dave wins, it's hard because he's obviously he'll just beat Kieran Joblin, who's also a dangerous lightweight and experienced guy. So that's a big feather in his cap. But does he need to have another win before he fights for the belt again, or is that enough to fight for the belt again in that division? Not because he wouldn't deserve it. Certainly a win over Joblin is a big thing and a big momentum push and a big way to get yourself back in the win column. But in such a talent stacked division, I don't know, it's just tricky. It's like, how do you decide? I'm glad I'm not Cam and Ben trying to figure out who you give that shot to next. Because it's just a tricky division to sort of deal with. But I think for Quinlan, he seems game to fight anyone and wants to fight any of these top lightweights. So it's just going to depend on what direction he and his team want to go, and then obviously what Cam and Ben want to do. But like we touched on, it's going to be, the faster they get a title defense booked, the faster we're going to be able to answer that question of, is this belt cursed? Can Quinlan hold on to the lightweight title? Because like we spoke about off air, the belt's gone through some hands in a very short time, and taken some victims as well with some iffy sort of things that happened. Obviously with Becca breaking his leg, Aguilera injuring his ribs, I don't know, there's something weird going on with that lightweight belt. So it's going to be interesting to see if what happens, and if Quinlan can be the the person that sort of sticks together a few title defenses and secures the belt and keeps it.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Sort of the lineage of the lightweight title. Like Quillen might be better off just vacating it at this point because it seems like the first defense is just something wild happens. So it's it's a little bit it's a little bit iffy that title belt.
Yeah, no, it's there's some weird voodoo type energy coming off that belt, like when we spoke about it. So yeah, because it's certainly it's done some chopping and changing. A few times. So, and there's been a couple, like we said, there's a couple times where there's some weird factors involved, right? Like Jack with the leg break, Aguilera's ribs going, Togo slipping on the canvas and getting his back taken. Like there's just, I don't know. Like if I'm a lightweight and I have to fight for that belt, you might end up doing that. You might win the belt and then just go, all right, I'm vacating the belt. I want to just be the challenger coming in for the belt again, not the actual champion.
Yeah, exactly. Quillen might get struck by lightning or something next time, like in his first offence. Who knows? It's just the way it goes. But with great mustache comes great responsibility, as they say. So maybe he can be the man to break the curse.
It's true. Maybe at the weigh-ins, you just have to give his opponent the belt and let them hold it at the weigh-ins, and maybe that might even some things out. I don't know.
Absolutely. Now, of course, one belt that isn't cursed. It's ruled over. The division is ruled over now with an iron fist by Lockjaw. It's the featherweight division. Of course, turned away the bantamweight champion in the main event. With a pretty spectacular knockout in the end. So, can you tell us a little bit about just how the fight played out itself and sort of. I guess way up sort of what was the plan and sort of how did the fight play out sort of relative to that?
So obviously coming out for the fight, obviously we had a game plan for the fight that obviously Joe established and Joe and Alex sort of were like giving me all the sort of tips in the lead up and breaking things down to what we can expect, what he's going to do, how we think he's going to react, and then how to sort of approach the fight. And certainly approach it as a mixed martial arts fight, which is what it is at the end of the day, and look to factor in all those areas. So obviously, was fortunate enough to get the knockout, and but had the fight continued on, I was certainly gonna mix in the wrestling and the grappling and stuff like that, and continue to sort of work the game plan that we sort of established. But I think. Early on, in that first round when I was sort of moving around and exchanging on the feet and just implementing my footwork and my movement and my distance, as the sort of round progressed onwards, I could see that Rod was biting on a lot of the sort of stuff that I was throwing his way, and was puzzled by a lot of the sort of different weapons and things that I was sort of utilizing. The front kicks sort of up the middle. The feints, the stance changes, the movement. The movement was probably the biggest thing that kind of threw him off, because he is someone that likes to just, come forward and sort of get into that sort of shorter range and land those big devastating punches, and especially find a home for that, big left hook that he's got. So, and then, the fight started playing out exactly how Joe and I sort of envisioned that it would. And then, going on back after the first round, going back to the stools, I sat down, and then the first thing I sort of said to Joe, I was like, I think we can expect him to sort of maybe start trying to involve the grappling from, coming out now. And because towards the end of the first round, I could hear Ben and his corner yelling that they wanted him to sort of try and bring in the wrestling, try and bring in the grappling, like give me something else to think about, try and factor that in. But I just kind of, it was always going to be a tough task for Rod to try and engage in the wrestling, especially in the open, like when, the fence, you're not on the fence, and, especially like that in the open with the movement and the distance that I was utilizing, but also like to actually get involved with the wrestling was going to be a tough task for him. And then, Joe just said to me, he's just like, he's puzzled by what we're doing. Let's just keep it up. He's going backwards in straight lines. If he's if he's just exiting out that one way, like let's finish with some kicks, or let's add one or two more punches in, and just make sure that we're being disciplined on our exits and with our range and stuff like that. And then he told me, to start working in the wrestling as well. Like look for the takedowns, look to give him that next roadblock to think about. Like if you're, it was almost like he's already puzzled by what we're doing. Now let's give him another threat to worry about on top of that, and then keep factoring that in. So I just listen to my coach, listen to what he was telling me, the instructions he gave me, and then was just confident in my preparation and the work that I did and in my own skill set. So, and then obviously ultimately led to the knockout in round 2. And yeah, it was sort of people probably, it's hard for this sort of casual sort of person just watching the fight to maybe pick out on a few little things, but I got the read and saw the reactions of him because he was reacting and biting to the feints and everything that I was doing. And then a couple of times when where I'd work off the jab and then I might have shown the right hand, but I didn't follow through with it, he was like leaning and dipping to the side. And then there was times where Joe was kind of like saying to me, feint and go. Sometimes we can just go, like, we could just go straight off the bat, because if, just keep giving him those different reactions. And that was that. I just kind of, the opportunity that was there, I moved, used my movement, drew him in, and he froze, and that was the time for the right hand to land over the top. And obviously there was some follow-up shots, and that was all she wrote. But yeah, it was I knew once the shot landed, like I knew, okay, like he's pretty well done. He's pretty well in trouble. And then, I just did my job and landed some follow-up shots, but I was happy the ref sort of stopped me when he did, because I think anything that was going to come next was just going to be like unnecessary and just a lot worse.
Definitely, yeah. Probably wasn't going to get any better from there, was it? So, I mean, like after the fight, like I think I mentioned this to you immediately after the fight, because of course you come to your mate Dan, the journalist, for pointers after your fights. That's it's obvious first point of call there. But I sort of mentioned to you, like the movement and stuff that you show in the cage, it just looks more and more sort of fluent every time. Like sort of the sideways movement and the stance switches and stuff like that. It just gets better and better every time you get in there, and your response was that's all Joe Lopez. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the influence that sort of Joe has had on you and your sort of evolving game?
Yeah, so he's obviously, he's got so much knowledge and invests so much time into us and everyone else on the team and all the fighters there. And then he's been doing this for a long time. He's been around this martial arts and stuff like that for a long time. So he's got a lot of knowledge that he gives, and he invests a lot of time in. And across the board, he's working with me to sort of improve in every sort of area that I can. And then you throw in on top of that the sort of, I think the cherry on top of sharing the room with Alex as well, and then my sort of level of training partners that I have. And like I sort of said, I'm taking the knowledge that Joe's given me and the coaching that he's giving me, and then I have to try and implement that, into my game and utilize it. But I've got to try and do that with some of the best fighters that we have around, so it's one thing to sort of implement something in your game or learn it and add it, but it's another thing to try and actually utilize it. So, I look at the caliber of my training partners that I share the mats with and the people that come and through the doors, and it's like, I'm trying to add these new skills and develop the sort of established ones I've got, but I'm still trying to use that effectively in the training room against high level, intelligent mixed martial artists. So, it's all of that plus the constant sort of feedback from Joe and little tweaks. That's gonna keep helping me to improve, and that's why I'm continuing to improve fight to fight. And that's why, like, I think looking at this fight, even compared to my last fight in December, I feel like I looked vastly different again. So, yeah, just gonna continue to do that, and I think that's why you're gonna continue to see me improve and get more comfortable and just keep improving and keep getting better.
Yep, and of course you're in enemy territory on the night, so you're on the receiving end of some boos, heading into the fight, and then you got to sort of like once you won the fight, you gave the crowd a bit of a shush and a sit down. Can you tell us a little bit about what the environment was like in there, and sort of I guess how satisfying it was to be able to sort of have the last laugh?
Yeah, that was obviously that venue's insane. It's so cool, and how it's set up with the tiered seating and everything like that, and it's packed in because obviously a lot of local fighters. So and the crowd just gets behind the shows there. So it was an insane atmosphere. Even before the fight, I went out into the actual arena and went to the top of the stands and just kind of just to soak in the amount of the atmosphere and what was sort of happening. But yeah, obviously going out, like I'm in enemy territory, right? So a lot of support there for Rod and, a couple of boos and stuff like that. But I love that sort of stuff, man. I thrive on that. I think we've spoken about that. I like upsetting the people and kind of, throwing a spanner in the works. But no, it was cool. And then, yeah, once I knew the fight was done, like when the ref pulled me off, obviously once I kind of climbed the cage, and then there's people was obviously the fight's over now, but some people were still booing. Obviously they're up, it's just normal. They're there to support their guy. Their guy didn't get the result, but then I had to just let him know to pipe down a little bit. I remember I walked around the cage, and as I was telling people to be quiet, I made eye contact with Jack Della. He was sort of hidden in the crowd a little bit in the inside the Champions Club sort of seating section, and he had his hood on, and he was standing up, and he looked at me and just like gave me a little nod, and we just kept going, and that was all. That was it. And then I just kept going with my sort of normal celebrations, and just went over and just said to Joe and Seb, I was like, well, that's kind of what we expected. We got it done. So no, it was cool. But I've never seen a venue empty out that fast before. I will say that I've never seen people leave as fast as they did. By the time I had my chat with Blake in post fight, there was not many people left in that building.
Just tumbleweeds in the crowd there. I mean, I guess you spoiled the party, didn't you? Sort of pissed on their parade over there in Perth.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I think I upset some people, but I still had some support in the crowd. There's a couple people there cheering, and a couple of people actually that I sort of flew over to come watch me fight, and that I didn't even know were doing that. So that's always cool. There's still some support that you get despite going into enemy territory. But like there was, it was cool. It was cool to sort of just go there and do my thing. Like I always talk about, like, I'm pretty experienced in there. I've had that many fights now where I'm just so present in there. So there's a couple of times during the fight where I was almost tried not to like laugh or smirk because of some of the stuff that people like were yelling out. But it's all part of it and what makes it fun. But even like during the fight, there was like at one stage I think Costa like stepped in and he threw a head kick and I kind of blocked it. And I just looked at him and I was just like, really? Like, you're throwing head kicks? Like, you don't see me trying to Imanari roll for your legs. Like, I don't, yeah, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing?
Stay in your lane.
And then like someone in the crowd yelled out. And then, yeah, it was so funny. Like, it's just all that sort of factors in and just makes it such a cool experience. But, I did, like, even in the cage afterwards, like, obviously once I'd, had my little moment of being, petty towards the crowd that was booing me, it was just kind of just soaking in the sort of experience, soaking in that the hard work paid off, got the result that I wanted, and did what I said I was going to do. And then even then, I went up afterwards. I spoke to Rod in the cage, and like I even said to him once they raised my hand and they brought us sort of together, I said to him, I was like, he's one of the very few fighters in this sport and in the region that I actually respect, because he turns up and fights and just does his thing. He doesn't sit on his record. He doesn't try and pick fights that are going to be easy for him, or just, he just gets in there and fights and gets after it. Not like some of these other guys in this sport and in this region and in this division. But yeah, so that's always cool. And Ben and his team and Becker and all the guys that were in his corner, they were all real cool, real respectful, and like. Congratulated me, and there was no malice. Obviously, like, we're just two guys getting in there that are competing. We're just two competitors, and that's the only way it was ever going to go. Right, one of us was going out of there on our back, and fortunately, it was me that was the one that was the the tool that turned the hammer into the mallet, as you said before the fight,
Yeah.
which you spoke about with that cracker Tito Ortiz quote.
Yep, yeah, that's it. That was, and that was probably the catalyst for the victory. Really, was my little Tito Ortiz quote that I sent to you. So you're welcome.
Yeah, it was the motivation I needed, honestly, right before walking out. That's what I needed, and that's what I had in my head on the walkout. Like I said to you off air, I was like, holy shit! And then I started just going down a rabbit hole on the walkout of Tito Ortiz quotes in my head until I got to the cage and was like, well, I should probably start thinking about my fight now.
Yeah, I mean, what more motivation would a fighter need than some some wisdom from Tito Ortiz? I mean, maybe you should have offered some of those to Alden Bates while he was punching walls and stuff. He'd have been like, "Excuse me, Alden, I think you could possibly use some of these." What do you reckon?
some of the gems. Just say, look, Alden, go out there, okay? Don't let him down until now, and go and do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, Lockjaw, I guess the natural question with you is what's going to come next? Because obviously you're 12-5 now, 5-fight win streak, 4 finishes. I think you've won 7 out of 8 thereabouts. I think that might be around about what the record is. So then that's the natural question, right? You've really sort of more or less cleaned out the featherweight division. So, where are we going here? I know you're not someone to rest on your laurels and sort of wait for the phone to ring, but, are there any sort of rumblings out there? What do you want next? What are your thoughts?
I want Francis Ngannou, and I want him for all the money boxing match. That's my first. No, obviously, but so let's just put it exactly how it is, right? I am active. I fight anyone they put in front of me. I fought everyone they've offered. I fought all the best people. I fought the people who didn't want to fight. And I'm finishing fights. I think all those things tick all the boxes that they need to tick. And I'm seeing people that are like trying to, other people in my division that are trying to, I guess present their case for certain stuff, and that's cool and all. And I wish everyone the best, and I want to see everyone sort of do well. And I hope people can kind of get to where they want to get to. But let's be honest, there's a lot of people in this game that just talk and then kind of sit and hope and wait, and will just buy their time and wait for things. I go out there and fight. That's my job. I go out there and do it. I'm active, and I get in there with top caliber people, and I run through them and I put them away because that's what I say I'm going to do. That's what I work very hard to do. And that's what I justify to myself because of the time that's invested into me by the people around me. So for me, moving forward now it is time for me to make that push. I said it in the cage. I've beat the best people in the country. I want to start testing myself against the best people in the world. So ideally moving forward would be hopefully in a perfect world would be to make my UFC debut in Sydney, and fight alongside some of the top athletes that we got in the region, and go out there and put on a performance, get another victory, make a successful debut in the UFC, and then be home in time to still read my daughter a bedtime story and kick back. That's ideally what I want to do. That's like in a perfect world, that's what I want to happen. So that's sort of the focus, and we're going to go off that. But, depending on how things sort of pan out, I'm going to fight at some point again, right? If I have, depending on how things pan out, that's obviously the first choice, but I'm, like I sort of spoke about, I'm not one of those people that just sits around. And so, if I have to fight, have to have another fight regionally, then we'll figure that out and we'll get another fight going. But the main focus now is trying to push forward and get to the UFC. I've been doing this professionally since 2017. I've had 17 fights in that time. I've avenged my losses at featherweight. I'm ticking all the boxes that I think you need to tick. So yeah, that's my focus moving forward. That's what I want to sort of do. That's how I want things to pan out. Like, I couldn't care if it's on the Sydney card or not. Ideally, that'd be, in a perfect world, that'd be the card that you want to do it on, right here at home in Australia. But they could call me next week and be like, "Do you want to fight this weekend?" And I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna say yes. And you can put me in there against anyone at any way at any time with any notice, and I'm going to say yes if it's going to give me the opportunity to sort of get my foot in the door.
Yeah, and how does that play out? Does has the phone rung, or is it sort of something that you and your team have to pursue to sort of get the UFC's attention? How does something like that normally come to pass?
Yeah, I guess it's just a case of I've made my intentions clear, and I'll just leave it in the hands of my management team and then just kind of yeah, just stay in the gym, stay working, and then if hopefully the phone rings, and when it does, I know I'm just sticking to the process. I'm not just waiting around being like, oh, we'll wait to see what happens. Like it's business as usual, right? I was straight back in the gym on Tuesday. Couple of Volks in camp, obviously. So my focus right now is just on helping him any way I can to be a body for him during his camp and do whatever's required of me for that, because it's the same way he does for me, and like we all do for each other. So that's what I'm focused on at the minute. But obviously at the same time, I'm staying ready. So if that phone rings, which fingers crossed we will, we'll hear something back from, and then, potentially, hopefully this time next week when we're sitting down and recording Fight Talk down under, potentially I could, might have, that'd be awesome if I could have some news to sort of share or something like that, or a more clear direction of what's next. But yeah, that's my focus. And like I said, ideally, that's what I'd want to do is, move on to the UFC and start fighting the best guys in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So yeah, that's Eternal 76 in the books. So it was an exciting event where we got a couple of other Aussies to round up. Of course, Jacinta Austin is fighting in Octagon MMA. I forget what country they're based in. Is they German? Is that in Germany? That one?
I think it's either Germany or something like that. A guy, one of the announcers and sort of commentator guys, Brian Lacey, is a guy that I actually know that's involved with them. And yeah, he just talked to me he's talked to me a few times about it, about how, how crazy of a cool event it is and the production value behind it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be cool to see Jacinta go out there and perform on a huge event like that.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, look, I think it looks like it's in Germany. She's fighting Sofia Bargashvili from Georgia, who's 8-3, 24 years old. Looks like she's fought in KSW, so she's obviously relatively experienced. Jacinta's coming off a split decision loss in UAE Warriors, so fair play to her. She's having a crack. She's going overseas and taking on some of these opponents. So yeah, how do you sort of think she'll fare over there?
Yeah, and obviously, that's it. That's what you got to do. Like the talent pool is obviously going to be a lot smaller, especially regionally, for some of these women's divisions. So it's cool that she's doing that, going, getting these fights overseas and getting some opportunities to I guess continue to showcase her skills, and especially now another chance to get back in the win column, maybe get a finish or a sort of definitive win, and then sort of keep separating yourself out there, because that's pretty much, especially now if she's fighting overseas and getting exposure like on a show like Octagon and like she did on UAE Warriors, you string together a couple wins, and some of these bigger promotions are definitely gonna come knocking, because they're seeing that you're sort of going out there and pursuing these fights and taking these sort of risks, and that's at the end of the day that's going to help you. It's definitely not going to hinder you.
Absolutely, yeah. So hopefully she can pick up a win over there. We don't know a huge amount about the opponent, but we know Jacinta's talented enough to sort of get it done on that sort of stage. So hopefully she can fall on the if it goes to the points, fall on the right side of the decision, or she can put her away.
Yeah, 100%. And she's obviously coming off a split decision loss on UAE Warriors, but also she's beaten some tough people, and she's obviously got a win over the current Hex flyweight champion, Lisa Kiriakou. So, that's a good feather to have in your cap as well. Like you've got a win over the number one ranked women's fighter in the region. That's something that you got in your back pocket as well. And now you're pursuing these other fights. Like it's all it all, all that stuff's a bonus and adds in. So it's pretty cool. So, and whenever we see any of the, we obviously regionally you're gonna have you're gonna have connections with people that you when you see them fight and stuff like that. But whenever any of the Anzac fighters are fighting overseas, we got to, sort of get behind them and back them and stuff like that. So, you got to, at that point, we got to, there's no time when it gets to sort of that sort of thing. There's no time for tall poppy syndrome or any shit like that. Like, so it's going to be cool to see her go out there and represent Australia, represent the country, and try and get herself another win.
Yeah, as we say, like a rising tide lifts all ships, doesn't it? If if we've got Australians going overseas and having some success, and that sort of just brings more eyeballs and more sort of scouts to this region. So it's we always want to see more and more Aussies going over and doing well. But and of course one Aussie that did go overseas and do well was Steve Erceg at UFC 289 this past weekend. We know he had a fight with Clayton Carpenter on the table, which fell through, and he's jumped on a fight with the number 10 ranked David Dvorak on I think around 10 days notice. No visa issues this time, which was a big tick. And he's gone out there and he's won the decision, which is a huge result. And he's slotted himself straight into the number 14 flyweight rank after one fight in the UFC. Now 10-1 in his overall career. So yeah, what did you make of Astro Boy's performance?
Fucking killed it, man. Fucking killed it. He was a 3-1 underdog going into the fight too. So I think he made a lot of people some money on the side as well, and got a $50,000 bonus as well for his troubles. It was a sick fight, but he just got after it. Just got stuck in, got after it, and still looked for the finish throughout. There was a few opportunities where I almost thought the fight, this is a wrap. Like when he went for that guillotine, I was like, this is over. Like, so he was always coming forward, always offensive. He was looking to put a pace on and looking to do damage, and then looking for the finish. And yeah, he absolutely killed it. Stephen Erceg's a fucking wild man. See him do that. You're fighting the number 10 ranked guy, and you go out there and piece him up like that, and announce yourself like that on your UFC debut. Doesn't get much better than that. So congratulations to him, and I look forward to fucking seeing him back in there as soon as possible.
Absolutely, and he kind of just sort of confirmed what we in Australia already knew, right? Like this is a super talented fighter, and he's a character you can get behind. He's like a really nice, sort of quietly spoken guy, which is kind of interesting to see. When people just flick the switch like that, and they can just fucking smash people in the octagon. But what do you think Erceg sort of figures now in that flyweight division? Obviously, he's ranked number 14 now. Can he sort of push on to he's just beaten number 10, right? Does he get someone further up the top 10 now?
I hope so. I think if I'm him and his team, that's what you'd want, right? You want someone inside the top 10 now, because you've beaten the number 10 guy. I'd be pushing for someone in the top 10. And flyweight is such an interesting division. It's so it's so competitive, and there's so many dangerous fighters, and the fights are always high pace, high intensity, and just insane everywhere. So I'd want him to see him in there next against someone in the top 10, and start sort of moving himself forward towards working towards that title, which I think sooner rather than later we'll be seeing him in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, should hope so. And obviously, one world champion we do have in action this weekend in boxing is Tim Tszyu. He's defending his WBO World Super Welterweight title against Carlos Ocampo, which is it's kind of an interesting sort of scenario, right? He's obviously he was supposed to fight Jamel Charlo. Charlo suffered the injury, and he's again Tim Tszyu is sort of cut from the same cloth as Lockjaw, right? He's not a guy who wants to sort of sit on his hands and wait for opportunities, and he's picked a pretty tough opponent, really. Like he could have picked he could have taken a tune-up fight. He could have sat and waited for Jamel Charlo, but he's picked Ocampo, who's 27 years old. He's of a good age, 35-2 record with 23 KOs. His two losses are to Sebastian Fondora and Errol Spence. So he's fought some big name guys, and obviously, he's lost to sort of the top tier guys, but he's got some wins against guys with good records as well. So, yeah, what do you make of I guess this matchup for Tim Tszyu and sort of the idea of taking on a title contender while he waits for Charlo?
Yeah, it's fucking. I mean, you expect nothing less from Timmy. Like that's Yeah, it's he could have taken one of these other fights, which was not uncommon in boxing, just to sort of stay loose, have another fight, sort of fill some time, get a paycheck before he's the fight with Charlo can happen. But yeah, he ain't built like that, and that's what you love to see. He just wants to go out there and fight, and like you said, picked a very dangerous opponent that you can't sleep on and think that, oh, okay, it's just gonna it's gonna just be one of those fights that's a cakewalk. I very much think it will be for Tim. He is just he's very, 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 very good, and we want to see that, and we want to see him just go out there and kill it. But yeah, it's going to be cool to watch, and it's cool that he's just decided to do that, and he's just getting after it, and that's what we love to see. So I'm gonna be watching that for sure. I'm excited. I hope he just goes out there and puts on another banger performance, and then we can sort of get closer to seeing him fight this fight that was meant to happen with Charlo.
Yeah, it seems to be just this, I don't know, this cloud hanging over the division, doesn't it? They've got to get this fight done, and, he's just continuing to test himself in the meantime, just sort of stepping up the opposition every time, and, fair play to him. It's, it's admirable, and he's only going to be better, isn't he? Like, when he finally does sort of get in the ring with Jamel Charlo, he's only going to be a better fighter for having beaten these, fought and hopefully beaten these guys like Ocampo.
Yeah, 100%. It's activity, and it's an excuse to keep working, keep improving. 100%. So it's only going to have a positive outcome if he goes out there and does his job and gets a win. It's only going to keep adding to his greatness.
Yeah, definitely, and it looks like it's a bit of an undercard there. Sam Goodman, Huss Hamden, and Rocky Ogden are on the undercard there. Looks like I think it's on the DAZN pay-per-view.
Yep.
This weekend. So yeah, if anyone wants to check that one out, that's obviously going to be a banger as well. But what is also going to be a banger is Fight Talk Down Under episode 42 next week. We'll obviously be sort of recapping all the fights that we've just talked about, and just sort of going over whatever's happening on the local scene, whatever fights we've got coming up. Until then, give us a follow on Instagram if you haven't already. It's at Fight Talk Down Under. Of course, remember to like and subscribe. Or I imagine most people probably already have. But if you haven't, like and subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Fight News Australia, and iHeartRadio. Lockjaw, what do you want to take us off with?
Just keep getting stuck behind these athletes and watch them compete, because obviously there's a lot happening, and like we sort of spoke about with the UFC announcing they're planning to come back to Australia multiple times over the next few years. And then with all that's happening in boxing, we had Tyson Fury being here, and all these things, combat sports across the board is rich in Australia, and it's continuing to develop and explode. So keep getting stuck in and supporting these athletes. That's all I have to say.
I gotta watch it, you never know what might stop you. Here I am, climbing up, feeling